Are you getting ready to beta read a book for someone for the first time? Here are my tips on how to be the best beta reader possible. Hello, beautiful people of the internet. How are you doing today? My name is Jackie and welcome back to my YouTube channel. In today's video, I am going to be sharing my tips for how to be an awesome beta reader and give super helpful writing feedback. In case you don't know, a beta reader is somebody who agrees to read an unpublished work and share their feedback before it is sent to literary agents, self-published, or posted online, because people often have beta readers for things like fan fiction too. You do not have to be a writer yourself to be a beta reader, though that always is an added bonus. You just have to be a typical reader who is willing to share your honest feedback with the author. Why did I just say honest? So weird. Your honest feedback. As an author who has worked with beta readers myself, I thought I would create this list of my tips for giving great beta reader feedback. Now, I will preface this by saying these are just my thoughts, and different authors may respond better to different types of criticism or expect different things from the experience. So if you're beta reading for someone, it's always a good idea to ask them what they're looking for. In fact, figuring out the kind of feedback the author wants is the #1 tip on my list, because different people may be looking for different types of feedback. I always try to tell my beta readers what I'm looking for, and if you're beta reading for someone and they haven't told you that, I don't think there's any harm in asking. Now, for instance, let's say you're beta reading a fan fiction for someone who doesn't have dreams of publication. They're not trying to make money off this story. Heck, maybe this is the first story they've ever written, period. That person might want you to give them mostly compliments. Tell them what they're doing well so they can identify their strengths. Meanwhile, there are other people who really enjoy having their work ripped apart, and maybe they'll really want you to just get down to the nitty-gritty and give them your nitpicky suggestions. Personally, when I work with beta readers, I really like it if they can give me both things they liked about the manuscript and things that they think should be improved. And I really like it if they comment on things like the plot or the characters, because line editing is something that I'm concerned with later in the process. But this type of feedback might vary depending on the person. So if they don't say what they want, it's always a good idea to ask. My next suggestion is to beta read stories you're actually interested in. This may seem like a no-brainer, but I do sometimes see people online who are just so excited to try beta reading that they'll take anything they can get. But I think it's really a better experience both for you as the reader and for the author if you're actually in their target demographic, because if you don't typically read books like this one, you may not know the genre conventions and what readers of that genre expect. If, for instance, I were to beta read, let's say, a Regency romance, my feedback may not be that helpful because I've never read a Regency romance in my life. I don't know the common tropes. I don't know the trends in that genre. I don't know what other people in that genre are writing. So I may not be able to give good feedback because I just am not the type of reader that that author is trying to reach. But if, for instance, I were to beta read a mystery, which is my favorite genre and also the one that I write in, I would definitely be able to give a lot of feedback because I am well read in that genre. I know what's popular and I know what tropes have been overdone. So I can give more specific feedback since I am well versed in that type of story. My other tip for being an awesome beta reader is to try to stick to the schedule. And if you can't, let the author know. Now, some authors, they might give you a story to beta read and say, say, no rush, take all the time you need, because they're not on a deadline. Other people, they might have certain expectations about how long it's going to take you to read the story. I, for instance, give my beta readers 3 weeks to read because I think that's a realistic amount of time, but also since I am going to submit my book to literary agents, I don't want to take months and months because every week that my beta readers are reading is a week that I can't be submitting and trying to get my book out into the world. At the same time, though, if an author gives you a timeline for the beta read and things pop up in your life, you should feel like you're able to communicate that with the author and ask for more time. If somebody gets angry at you for asking for, let's say, an extra week, then I think that's a sign you shouldn't be beta reading for that person. You're doing this for free. You are giving the author your valuable time for free. And the author should be understanding that you're not going to drop everything in your life to work on this beta read. At the same time, though, you also have to respect the author's time. So don't hang on to a manuscript for 3 months if they asked you to get it back to them in 3 weeks. I also personally think that if, let's say, something comes up in your personal life and you can't read anymore, or you're just not enjoying the book and you don't want to continue reading, I think you should tell the author that you can no longer read for them. I think it's just respectful, and it also does help the author. You may wonder, well, how does me not finishing the book help the author? Well, if, for instance, you put the book down because there was a part that you thought was too slow, or you just hated the main character, etc., that is valuable feedback for the author. The author needs to know if there's something in the book that is causing them to lose readers. And if it's just something in your personal life, telling the author that also helps them, because then they know, okay, it's not anything that I did, it was an outside circumstance, and that's why the person didn't finish my book. My next tip for being an awesome beta reader is to give both positives and negatives. When I am working with beta readers, I want them to tell me both what they're really enjoying about my book and what they think can be improved. It is valuable to hear both positive and negative feedback because you want to know what is working with the manuscript and also how you can make it better. Beta readers help me because sometimes they think of problems with the book that hadn't even occurred to me. They can also help me know if things are coming across the way that I intended them to. Maybe there was something that I thought that I explained, but it turns out that I didn't and the beta readers don't understand it. That is valuable feedback, but at the same time, if you're just telling someone all the things you didn't like, that's really gonna take a toll on their self-confidence, and it's not constructive. One method for giving feedback that people all over the internet talk about is the compliment sandwich. Now, what is a compliment sandwich if you've never heard of it before? A compliment sandwich basically means that when you're giving somebody critique, you should start with a compliment and end with a compliment. Now, there have been studies that have shown when a human reads a list of things, the first thing and the last thing are going to be the things that stick with them the most. So, if you start with something positive and you end with something positive, the person you're critiquing is going to leave the critique feeling good about themselves because you started and ended positively. If you were to say, this is what I liked, now here are all the things you did wrong, the author may leave the critique feeling bad about themselves, feeling like you didn't like their story, feeling like you don't think they're talented. It's much better to start on a positive note and end on a positive note because it just makes the person feel good. It makes them feel like, okay, this person is genuinely trying to support and help me versus tearing them down. Okay, next tip. This is, in my opinion, one of the most important tips on the entire list. Always say why you feel the way you do and give specific examples whenever possible. Okay, for instance, if I was critiquing a book and I said, I hate Joe, that's not helpful to the author because I'm not telling the author what it is about Joe that I hate. Is it because he reminds me of an ex that I had, and that's why I don't like him? Am I saying that I don't like him because his sense of humor just doesn't resonate with me? Or is it because of specific things that he does in the story? The author doesn't know why you said that you hated him, and so the author is not going to know how they can improve the character in future drafts. If I were to say, I really don't like Joe because I think in this scene, he treats his girlfriend really badly and doesn't care about her feelings. Okay, that is specific advice explaining why I felt the way that I did about Joe. And the author can then look at that scene and ensure that the scene is coming across the way they intended. This goes with positive feedback too. For instance, instead of just saying, I really like your use of description, you could say, I really like your use of description, such as this example here on page 75. You're giving the author a specific example they can look to. My next tip is to recognize what the author is trying to achieve. And don't try to change the story to make it what you personally would do. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, this is not your story. I mean, I read plenty of published books where I know that if I had written it, I would have made a different choice. But that's just me. I am not the author, and this is their vision. Now, for instance, recently I posted a query letter for critique on a public forum, and somebody responded to my query saying, this query has absolutely no voice, and then proceeded to suggest ways that I could rewrite the query. But all of these suggestions did not sound like something I would write at all. That critiquer was trying to force me to write more like them, instead of recognizing that I had a different style. Or another example, if, like I said earlier, I was beta reading a Regency romance, for example, I personally would never write a book with really explicit sex scenes. But if I was reading a Regency romance with sex scenes in it, I would not tell the author to delete them all, because it's not my book, it's not my choice. I have to recognize, okay, this author is writing a story where this is something the readers may expect. I have to think about the scene and think about what the author is trying to do. Like, for instance, maybe they wrote this sex scene because they want to establish the chemistry and the closeness between two characters to show their relationship progressing. My feedback should center on making sure that that comes across successfully, not enforcing my own preferences on it. Now, this leads me nicely into the next 2 points on my list. First, avoid absolute statements, but do use I statements. What do I mean by this? Well, for instance, the person who left me that unhelpful critique on my query letter used an absolute statement. This has absolutely no voice. That is an absolute statement that is untrue. It does have a voice. It has my voice. And maybe you don't like it, but it's still there. Now, something that you might say instead is, let me think of an example. Let's say you're reading a book with multiple narrators, and to you, all of the narratorial voices sound the same. A way that you can phrase this to be helpful would be, I am struggling to differentiate the different characters in their chapters. Could you possibly give them more specific manners of speaking so that I can distinguish them in my mind? Therefore, you are explaining your personal opinion Not saying like, absolutely, this is horrible, you have to change it. Just saying, hey, this was my experience. This is why I felt that way. The other thing is you need to recognize that everybody's opinion is just that, an opinion. You don't know everything, I don't know everything, and when you're making these absolutist statements, it just comes across as unhelpful and like you think that you are the end-all be-all of giving criticism. You know what I mean? I think it's more helpful to just say, hey, this is how I felt, and this is why I felt that way. I also think that as a beta reader, you should ask questions if you need to. Like I said, when you're giving somebody feedback on their work, you are helping them achieve their vision. And if you don't understand what that vision is, you should ask. For instance, say, what were you trying to achieve with this scene here? If you don't understand why the scene was in the book, asking the author why they included it can help you give feedback on how to improve it. Like, for instance, if I wrote a scene and I said, well, to answer your question, I intended for this to be a fast-paced, action-packed scene, and that's not how you felt when reading it, you can now give me specific feedback to help me accomplish my goal. You don't understand a character's motivation? Ask. You don't understand why a character made a choice? Ask. The author can tell you what they intended, and therefore you have the information you need to know whether they were successful at their goal or not. Okay, my penultimate piece of advice is one that honestly may just be very personal to me, but I think you should feel free to fangirl or fanboy fan person as you see fit. If you're beta reading for me and there's a part that you just really love and you want to comment a string of heart emojis, go ahead. That will make me super happy. If there are two characters that you really want to lock lips, tell me. That will make me super happy. Because I think giving positive feedback like this really does wonders to boost the author's confidence and also help them know what their strengths as an author are. One of my favorite pieces of feedback I ever received from a beta reader was a beta telling me that when she read the twist in my mystery, she gasped so loudly that she woke her husband up from dead sleep. I still think about that feedback constantly. And finally, be honest with your feedback, because that's why we have beta readers. We want people to tell us what they honestly think about the book. When I have beta readers, I use Google Docs and give my betas the ability to comment in the document. So if you're beta reading for me, don't let what other people commented influence your opinions. Like, for instance, if there was a scene that you really liked and somebody else commented they didn't like it, that doesn't mean that you should say you didn't like it. You should say, I really liked this scene, and then let me, the author, determine what I want to do with that feedback. Also, you should feel like you're able to give both positives and negatives for the book, because both of them are essential. You really do need to have both positive and negative comments when you're getting constructive criticism. And if an author gets mad at you because you made a suggestion or tries to argue with you about it, that is just a sign that that person is not professional, and you shouldn't waste any more of your time giving them feedback. Ultimately, at the end of the day, there are no right or wrong answers when giving feedback, and I get beta readers because I want to hear their honest reactions to my story. So I hope this video was helpful and you now feel more prepared to beta read a story for someone. If there are any other tips that you want to add, do let me know in the comments. Let me know, have you ever been a beta reader before or worked with betas before? I would really like to hear more about your experience, and if you have any advice that I forgot to mention. you enjoyed this video, please feel free to give it a big thumbs up. It really does help my channel grow and reach more people. My social media links are in the description if you would like to connect with me on other platforms. And please subscribe to my channel if you want to see more from me. I post new videos every Wednesday and Sunday. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope you have a stellar rest of your day. Bye, and I'll see you next time.